Most people are looking for a breakthrough, something dramatic, something life changing that will suddenly turn everything around. They search for motivation, for shortcuts, for secrets that promise fast results. But what they overlook, what almost everyone ignores, is that life rarely changes in big moments. Life changes in small moments, repeated day after day, often unnoticed, often uncelebrated. Consistency is not exciting. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand applause. In fact, it often feels insignificant. Doing a small thing today doesn't feel powerful. Doing it again tomorrow feels ordinary. And doing it for a year feels boring to most people. Yet this is where the real power lies. Not in intensity, but in continuity. Not in dramatic effort, but in disciplined repetition. Here's the strange part. The things that are easy to do are also easy not to do. A few minutes of reading, a short walk, a small improvement in skill, a better choice with your time. None of these seem urgent. And because they don't feel urgent, they are postponed. And because they are postponed, they quietly shape a future you did not intend. Consistency works whether you believe in it or not. It works on your habits, your attitude, your income, your health, and your character. Every day, you are practicing something. You are either practicing discipline or practicing neglect. You are either strengthening your future or weakening it. And the frightening part is that you won't notice the results today. You'll notice them later, when they are hard to reverse. People often say, "I'll change when I feel motivated." But consistency doesn't wait for motivation. It creates it. Doing the right thing, even when you don't feel like it, builds self-respect. And self-respect changes how you think, how you act, and what you believe is possible for your life. The truth is simple, but it's not easy. Success is the natural result of a few simple disciplines practiced every day. Failure is the natural result of a few small errors in judgment repeated daily. Nothing dramatic, nothing shocking. Just quiet choices compounded by time. If you can learn to respect the power of consistency, especially when no one is watching, you won't need to chase success. Over time, success will come looking for you. Success is rarely the result of one big decision, one lucky break, or one dramatic moment that changes everything overnight. Most people imagine that life turns around when something extraordinary happens. But life doesn't usually work that way. What truly shapes a person's future are the small decisions they make every day. Decisions so simple that they hardly feel important at the moment they're made. Choosing to read a few pages instead of watching television. Choosing to arrive a little earlier instead of right on time. Choosing to save a small amount instead of spending it. All of these seem minor, almost insignificant. Yet these small actions, repeated consistently, quietly begin to shape direction, character, and results. The challenge is that small actions don't give immediate rewards. When you do something big, you feel big results quickly. When you do something small, the results are delayed. And because the results are delayed, most people lose interest. They say, "This isn't working," when in reality, it is working beneath the surface. Just like planting a seed, you don't dig it up every day to see if it's growing. Growth happens quietly, invisibly, and patiently. The same is true with personal development and success. Small actions are like seeds planted in the soil of time, and time will eventually reveal what you've been planting. One major decision can change your direction, but it cannot carry you the entire distance. Deciding to succeed is important, but that decision must be followed by daily actions that support it. Without those actions, the decision fades into a good intention. Life rewards execution, not intention. And execution is built through repeated behavior. This is why people who seem ordinary often outperform those who appear more talented. Talent may create opportunity, but consistency creates results. Daily actions also shape identity. What you do repeatedly becomes who you are. If you consistently act disciplined, you don't just get disciplined results. You become a disciplined person. If you consistently avoid responsibility, you don't just avoid effort. You become someone who avoids effort. Over time, identity becomes destiny. People rarely fail because of one terrible decision. They fail because of a pattern of small neglects that slowly lower their standards and expectations. The beauty of this principle is that it works in both directions. Just as small negative actions can quietly destroy a future, small positive actions can quietly build an extraordinary one. Improving 1% a day may not feel impressive, but compounded over months and years, it becomes remarkable. The person who wins is not always the one who works the hardest on one day, but the one who works reasonably hard every day. Most people wait for conditions to be perfect before they act. They wait for confidence, motivation, or clarity. But confidence is a result, not a requirement. It grows from keeping small promises to yourself. Every small action you complete strengthens belief. Every small action you avoid weakens it. Over time, belief becomes behavior, and behavior becomes outcome. Life does not ask for massive effort all at once. It asks for small effort consistently. And when you understand this, pressure disappears. You no longer feel overwhelmed by the size of your goals because you focus on today's actions. Today becomes manageable. And when enough manageable days are stacked together, they form an extraordinary life. Consistency compounds quietly over time, whether positive or negative. And this is one of the most overlooked truths about personal success and failure. Most people expect progress to be loud and obvious. They want visible proof that what they are doing is working. And when they don't see immediate change, they assume nothing is happening. But life doesn't operate on instant feedback. It operates on accumulation. What you do repeatedly adds up, slowly at first, and then all at once. By the time the results become visible, the cause has usually been in motion for a long time. Think about how decline happens. Rarely does someone wake up one day and suddenly fail. Failure arrives quietly. It shows up as skipped disciplines, small compromises, and minor excuses that seem harmless in the moment. One missed day doesn't matter much. One poor choice doesn't feel dangerous. But repeated over weeks and months, these choices begin to form momentum. The scary part is that negative momentum feels comfortable at first. There's no immediate pain, no urgent warning, no loud alarm. And because there's no immediate consequence, people assume they are safe. Positive consistency works the same way, but in reverse. Small efforts feel unrewarding at the beginning. Reading 10 minutes a day doesn't transform your life in a week. Saving a small amount doesn't make you wealthy in a month. Practicing a skill briefly each day doesn't make you an expert quickly. So people quit too early. They quit not because the process doesn't work, but because the results haven't shown up yet. What they don't realize is that the results are being stored, not displayed. Time is the multiplier that most people forget to calculate. Consistency without time feels ineffective. Time without consistency feels wasted. But when the two work together, they create a force that is nearly unstoppable. The same action repeated daily gains strength as time passes. At first, progress feels flat. Then it begins to rise. Eventually, it accelerates. This is why success often looks sudden from the outside, even though it took years to build. The danger is that compounding works even when you are unaware of it. Your habits are either earning interest or accumulating debt. Your thinking, your health, your skills, your relationships. Everything responds to repetition. Each day you reinforce a direction, whether you intend to or not. And once momentum is established, it becomes harder to change course. This is why starting small and starting early is so powerful. It gives you time on your side. Many people wait for proof before they commit fully. They want reassurance that their effort will pay off. But compounding demands faith before evidence. You must trust the process long before you can measure the results. This requires patience, and patience is a skill developed through practice. Those who succeed learn to respect the invisible phase of growth. They understand that the absence of visible progress does not mean the absence of progress itself. When you truly grasp the quiet power of compounding, your behavior changes. You become more careful with small decisions. You value daily discipline more than occasional intensity. You stop underestimating the impact of what you do today because you understand it is shaping what will happen tomorrow, next year, and far beyond. Most people dramatically underestimate what their daily habits are doing to their future because habits work slowly, quietly, and without asking for attention. A habit does not announce its long-term consequences when it is formed. It disguises itself as something small, routine, and harmless. Waking up late doesn't feel like a life decision. Skipping learning today doesn't feel like falling behind. Choosing comfort over discipline doesn't feel dangerous. And because these choices feel small, people assume their impact will also be small. What they fail to see is that habits are not measured by a single day, but by repetition over time. Every habit is a vote for the type of future you are creating. The problem is that the future doesn't cash those votes immediately. Life keeps a quiet record. Each day, you practice a habit. You reinforce a direction. And direction, not intention, determines destination. Many people have good intentions for their future, but their habits are voting against those intentions every single day. They hope for growth while practicing stagnation. They want progress while rehearsing procrastination. Eventually, reality aligns, not with what they wanted, but with what they practiced. Habits shape your standards long before they shape your results. What you tolerate repeatedly becomes normal. If you tolerate disorganization, low effort, or inconsistency, those conditions begin to feel acceptable. Over time, your standards quietly drop, and with them goes your potential. On the other hand, small disciplined habits raise your standards without force. You begin to expect more from yourself, not because someone told you to, but because your behavior has trained you to believe you are capable of more. One of the biggest mistakes people make is judging their habits by how they feel today. A bad habit rarely feels bad at the beginning. It often feels good, easy, or convenient. A good habit rarely feels good at the beginning. It often feels uncomfortable, boring, or inconvenient. This reversal confuses people. They chase what feels good now and avoid what feels difficult now, unaware that the feelings will eventually switch places. What feels easy today becomes hard later. What feels hard today becomes easy later. Habits also compound emotionally. Daily actions influence how you think about yourself. When you consistently avoid discipline, even in small ways, it chips away at self-trust. You stop believing your own promises. Confidence erodes, not because of one failure, but because of many small betrayals of your own word. Discipline restores confidence the same way, quietly. Each small habit kept becomes evidence that you can rely on yourself. Over time, this internal trust changes how you approach challenges, opportunities, and risk. People often search for motivation to change their habits. But habits don't require motivation as much as they require awareness. Once you clearly see where a habit is leading, it becomes harder to ignore. Daily habits are like the steering wheel of your life. You don't feel the turn immediately, but miles down the road, you end up in a completely different place. The tragedy is not that people fail, but that they fail gradually, without realizing what is happening, until the distance between where they are and where they wanted to be feels overwhelming. The good news is that the same daily system that creates decline can be used to create growth. You don't need to overhaul your entire life to change your future. You only need to become more aware of what you are practicing each day, because whatever you practice consistently is quietly becoming your future, whether you notice it or not. Discipline practiced in small ways builds character and confidence because it trains you to do what should be done, even when it would be easier not to. Most people think discipline is about forcing yourself to do hard things all the time. But true discipline begins with the smallest choices. It begins when no one is watching, when there is no immediate reward, and when the effort feels almost too minor to matter. These moments may seem unimportant, but they are the training ground for personal strength. Every small act of discipline is a promise kept to yourself. And the more promises you keep, the more you begin to trust yourself. Confidence does not come from bold declarations or positive thinking alone. It comes from evidence. Each time you follow through on a small commitment, you provide proof that your word has value. Over time, this proof accumulates, and self-doubt loses its grip. People who lack confidence often don't lack ability. They lack a history of consistent follow-through. Character is built the same way. It is not shaped by what you say you believe, but by what you do repeatedly. When you consistently choose the disciplined option, even in small matters, you develop integrity. You become someone who can be counted on, first by yourself and eventually by others. And this kind of character doesn't need supervision. It doesn't depend on pressure. It operates from internal standards rather than external force. Small disciplines prepare you for larger challenges. Life will eventually ask more of you. More responsibility, more leadership, more resilience. When that moment arrives, you will not rise to the level of your hopes. You will fall to the level of your habits. Someone who practices discipline daily, even in modest ways, is better equipped to handle pressure because discipline has already become familiar. It no longer feels like punishment. It feels like identity. Many people wait until they feel confident before they act disciplined. But discipline comes first. Confidence follows. Acting in spite of uncertainty is what creates certainty over time. Each disciplined action strengthens emotional control. You learn that feelings do not have to dictate behavior. This realization is powerful. It shifts control from circumstance to choice, from impulse to intention. Discipline also sharpens decision-making. When you practice it regularly, you become more aware of consequences. You begin to think long-term rather than short-term. You stop asking, "What do I feel like doing?" and start asking, "What will this lead to?" This shift in thinking is one of the clearest signs of maturity and personal growth. What makes small discipline so effective is that it is sustainable. Extreme effort cannot be maintained for long, but small disciplined actions can be repeated daily. And repetition is what transforms effort into identity. Over time, you no longer struggle to act disciplined. It becomes natural. The effort decreases, but the results increase. The tragedy is not that discipline is difficult, but that it is misunderstood. People avoid it because they associate it with deprivation or pressure. In reality, discipline is the foundation of freedom. It gives you options. It builds respect, internally and externally. It gives you the confidence to take on bigger goals, because you know you can rely on yourself. When you commit to practicing discipline in small ways, you begin to change how you see yourself. You stop thinking of discipline as something you must do and start seeing it as part of who you are. And that shift quietly transforms every area of your life. Inconsistency keeps people busy, but prevents real progress, because activity is often mistaken for advancement. Many people are constantly moving, constantly trying, constantly starting something new, yet they rarely arrive anywhere meaningful. They confuse motion with momentum and effort with effectiveness. Being busy creates the illusion of productivity, but without consistency, effort is scattered and results remain shallow. Progress requires direction, and direction requires sustained focus over time. When actions are inconsistent, energy is constantly being reset. Each time you stop and start again, you lose the accumulated benefit of previous effort. This is why people feel exhausted without feeling accomplished. They are always restarting, always rebuilding motivation, always trying to regain discipline. The cost of inconsistency is not just lost results, but lost confidence. Repeatedly quitting and restarting teaches the mind that follow through is optional, and that belief quietly undermines future effort. Inconsistent effort also makes it difficult to measure progress. When actions are sporadic, feedback becomes unclear. You don't know what's working because nothing has been done long enough to produce a result. This leads to frustration and doubt. People begin to blame circumstances, strategies, or lack of talent, when the real issue is simply lack of continuity. Success does not require constant adjustment. It requires sustained application. Business often comes from reacting rather than leading. Inconsistent people tend to chase urgency instead of importance. They respond to whatever feels pressing in the moment, rather than committing to what matters most. This creates a cycle of distraction. Important tasks are postponed because they don't demand immediate attention, while unimportant tasks consume time because they demand immediate response. Over time, life becomes crowded with activity but empty of progress. Consistency, on the other hand, creates leverage. When you do the same meaningful actions repeatedly, effort begins to compound. You spend less time deciding what to do and more time doing it. Habits reduce friction. Focus increases. Momentum builds. What once required discipline eventually becomes routine, freeing mental energy for growth and improvement. This is when progress becomes noticeable. Inconsistency also weakens identity. When behavior changes frequently, self-image becomes unstable. One day you see yourself as motivated, the next day as undisciplined. This internal conflict drains energy. A consistent routine stabilizes identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who shows up, regardless of mood or circumstance. This stable self-image is a powerful foundation for long-term success. Many people believe they need more time, more resources, or better conditions to succeed. In reality, what they need is fewer interruptions to their effort. Consistency simplifies life. It reduces decision fatigue. It creates a rhythm that carries you forward even on difficult days. You no longer rely on bursts of enthusiasm. You rely on systems that continue working even when motivation fades. The real danger of inconsistency is that it delays the truth. When effort is steady, results, good or bad, become clear. When effort is scattered, reality remains hidden. People stay stuck in hope instead of facing feedback. They remain busy instead of becoming effective. And years can pass without meaningful change, not because they lacked ability, but because they never stayed with one disciplined course long enough for it to produce a result. Consistency does not demand perfection. It demands return. It means coming back to the task, the habit, the goal, again and again. And when you understand this, you stop glorifying business and start valuing progress, because progress only belongs to those who are willing to stay with the work long after the excitement has disappeared. Ordinary actions done daily create extraordinary results because repetition gives simple efforts a power that single moments can never achieve. Most people believe extraordinary results require extraordinary talent, resources, or opportunity. They assume that success belongs to the gifted or the lucky. What they overlook is that greatness is usually built on plain, unglamorous actions performed consistently over time. These actions rarely attract attention, but they quietly shape outcomes that appear impressive only after years of accumulation. Daily actions matter because they shape trajectory. A small action taken once may seem meaningless, but taken repeatedly, it changes direction. Just as a slight adjustment in the angle of a plane's takeoff determines its destination thousands of miles away, small daily behaviors determine where a life eventually arrives. The change is not dramatic in the beginning. In fact, it often feels invisible. Yet direction, once established, continues to carry momentum forward. What makes ordinary actions powerful is their accessibility. Almost anyone can do them. Reading a few pages, practicing a skill briefly, making one better choice, or improving one small habit does not require exceptional ability. Because these actions are simple, they can be repeated. And repetition is the secret ingredient. While intensity fades, repetition endures. A person who relies on bursts of effort will always be inconsistent. A person who relies on daily actions builds stability. Extraordinary results are often the byproduct of patience. Ordinary actions do not deliver immediate gratification. They ask for faith before evidence. This is why many people abandon them. They want proof before commitment. But those who persist understand that progress accumulates quietly. They measure success not by daily outcomes, but by daily adherence to the process. Over time, adherence transforms into mastery. Ordinary actions also reduce resistance. When a task feels manageable, the mind is less likely to resist it. Large goals can overwhelm, but small actions invite participation. This lowers the barrier to consistency. When something becomes part of a daily routine, it no longer feels like effort. It feels like normal behavior. And normal behavior repeated over years creates abnormal results. Another reason ordinary actions are so effective is that they build skill gradually. Skill is not developed in sudden leaps, but through repeated exposure. Each repetition sharpens understanding, improves efficiency, and builds confidence. Over time, what was once basic becomes refined. The person who commits to ordinary practice eventually reaches an extraordinary level, not because of sudden transformation, but because of steady progression. People often admire success without studying its foundation. They see the result and assume there was a secret. The truth is usually less exciting. Success is often the outcome of someone doing simple things long after others grew bored. While others searched for shortcuts, they stayed with the basics. While others waited for motivation, they relied on routine. Extraordinary results are not the reward for complexity, but for consistency. Ordinary actions work because they are repeatable, sustainable, and cumulative. When you respect the power of daily effort, you stop chasing dramatic change and start building lasting progress. You realize that the path to an extraordinary life is paved with ordinary steps taken faithfully, patiently, and without the need for recognition or applause. Consistency shapes identity before it shapes outcomes, because who you become always precedes what you achieve. Most people focus on results and wonder why their circumstances do not change, but circumstances are only the surface. Beneath every visible outcome is an invisible identity formed by repeated behavior. Long before results show up in your bank account, your health, or your career, they show up in your habits. And those habits quietly answer the question of who you believe you are. Every repeated action sends a message to the mind. When you show up daily, even in small ways, you begin to see yourself as someone who follows through. When you avoid effort repeatedly, you begin to see yourself as someone who quits. These conclusions are rarely conscious, but they are powerful. Identity is not built by words or affirmations alone. It is built by evidence. What you do consistently becomes the proof you use to define yourself. This is why change often feels difficult. People try to change outcomes without changing identity. They want success without becoming successful in their behavior. They want confidence without practicing courage. But the mind resists outcomes that conflict with identity. If your identity says, "I'm not disciplined," disciplined behavior will feel uncomfortable and temporary. If your identity says, "I'm the kind of person who shows up," showing up feels natural. Consistency is how identity is rewritten. Small, consistent actions are especially powerful because they lower resistance. You don't need to act perfectly, you need to act repeatedly. Each repetition reinforces the same message: this is who I am. Over time, the identity strengthens. Discipline stops feeling forced and starts feeling normal. Effort becomes expectation. What once required motivation becomes routine. Outcomes are delayed because identity takes time to solidify. This is where many people lose patience. They expect external results before internal change has had time to settle. But once identity shifts, outcomes follow almost automatically. A person who sees themselves as disciplined will make disciplined choices without constant struggle. A person who sees themselves as a learner will seek growth naturally. Identity simplifies decision making because behavior aligns with self-image. Consistency also protects identity during difficult moments. Motivation rises and falls, but identity remains stable. When you know who you are, temporary feelings lose their power. You don't ask, "Do I feel like doing this today?" You ask, "Is this what someone like me does?" That question alone eliminates countless poor decisions. It replaces emotion with principle. Many people sabotage their progress because their actions and identity are in conflict. They try something briefly, quit, and then reinforce the belief that they are inconsistent. This creates a loop that is hard to escape. The way out is not through dramatic change, but through small wins. Each small act of consistency interrupts the pattern. Each follow-through weakens the old identity and strengthens the new one. The most important transformation consistency provides is internal. External success is just the reflection. When you practice consistency, you become reliable to yourself. Trust grows. Confidence stabilizes. And from that stable foundation, results begin to emerge naturally. The world eventually responds to who you have become. But long before that happens, you will feel the difference in how you think, choose, and carry yourself, because consistency has quietly reshaped your identity from the inside out. Time rewards what you practice repeatedly, not what you intend, wish for, or occasionally attempt. Life is neutral. It does not respond to hopes or promises. It responds to patterns. What you repeat becomes familiar. What becomes familiar becomes efficient. And what becomes efficient eventually becomes effective. Over time, time itself begins to cooperate with what you consistently practice, multiplying its effects in ways that are often underestimated. Most people overestimate what they can do in a short period and underestimate what repeated effort can do over a long one. They expect fast returns and become discouraged when progress feels slow. But time does not operate on urgency. It operates on accumulation. Each repeated action deposits something into the future. At first, the deposits seem too small to matter. But time keeps perfect records. Nothing is lost. Nothing is ignored. Practice is powerful because it shapes skill and understanding simultaneously. Each repetition refines ability, sharpens awareness, and reduces resistance. What once felt difficult gradually becomes easier. What once required focus becomes automatic. This is how time rewards effort, not by sudden breakthroughs, but by gradual improvement that compounds. The person who practices consistently eventually reaches a level where progress appears effortless, even though it was earned through repetition. Time also magnifies mistakes and neglect. Just as positive practice compounds upward, negative practice compounds downward. Repeated avoidance weakens capability. Repeated excuses strengthen limitation. Time does not punish or reward randomly. It simply multiplies whatever direction you choose. This is why small habits are so dangerous or so powerful. They are given the most time to grow. Many people wait for the perfect moment to begin. They delay practice until conditions improve, until confidence increases, until clarity arrives. But time rewards starters, not waiters. Practice creates clarity, not the other way around. When you begin, even imperfectly, time begins to work on your behalf. When you delay, time works against you by reinforcing inaction. What makes time such a powerful ally is that it removes the need for intensity. You do not have to do everything at once. You simply have to do something repeatedly. Time will handle the rest. It smooths rough edges. It strengthens weak skills. It builds endurance. The person who stays with the practice long enough eventually surpasses those who relied on bursts of effort. Time also builds credibility. Repetition creates consistency, and consistency builds trust. First internally, then externally. When you practice something regularly, you begin to trust yourself. Others begin to trust you as well. Opportunities follow reliability. Respect follows dependability. These rewards do not come quickly, but they come inevitably to those who stay the course. The most overlooked truth is that time is always passing. Whether you are practicing wisely or not, you cannot pause it. You can only decide what it will multiply. Each day is a vote for a future outcome. Each repetition strengthens a direction. Over months and years, time transforms practice into identity, identity into results, and results into reputation. Life eventually reflects what you have practiced all along, not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily, honestly, and without exception. Small neglects, repeated daily lead to major regret because life rarely collapses from one dramatic mistake. It erodes slowly through things left undone, standards quietly lowered, and responsibilities postponed. Just one more day. Neglect is dangerous precisely because it feels harmless. Skipping a small discipline today doesn't feel like a problem. Avoiding one uncomfortable conversation doesn't feel costly. Choosing convenience over effort doesn't feel like a turning point. Yet these small acts of neglect accumulate silently, shaping a future that no one consciously chose. Neglect works in the shadows. It does not demand attention the way failure does. There is no immediate penalty, no loud consequence, no urgent warning. That is why it is tolerated. People tell themselves they will make it up later. That tomorrow will be different. That one missed effort won't matter. And they are right in the short term. One missed effort rarely matters. But a pattern of missing effort always does. Regret is not born in moments of chaos. It is born in moments of neglect, repeated long enough to become normal. Daily neglect slowly changes what a person expects from themselves. Standards don't collapse overnight. They drift downward. What once felt unacceptable begins to feel reasonable. What once felt important begins to feel optional. This shift is subtle, but it is powerful. As standards fall, potential shrinks. People don't fail because they aim too high and miss. They fail because they stop aiming altogether. Neglect also weakens self-trust. Each time you ignore what you know you should do, you send a message to yourself that your word doesn't matter. Over time, that message becomes belief. Confidence fades, not because of lack of ability, but because of repeated self-betrayal. Regret later in life is rarely about things people tried and failed at. It is about things they knew they should have done and didn't. The cruel part about neglect is that its cost is delayed. The bill always comes later. Health neglected becomes illness. Skills neglected become obsolescence. Relationships neglected become distance. Opportunities neglected become memories. And when the cost finally shows up, people are often shocked, not realizing they have been paying installments for years through small daily omissions. Most regret is quiet. It is not dramatic or emotional in public. It shows up in private moments. When people look back and recognize the gap between what they could have become and what they allowed themselves to become, that gap is rarely created by lack of opportunity. It is created by lack of daily care. Life responds generously to attention and harshly to neglect, not out of cruelty, but out of consistency. Neglect is especially dangerous because it disguises itself as comfort. Rest feels deserved. Avoidance feels relieving. Delay feels harmless. But comfort unchecked becomes a habit, and habits shape destiny. The things you don't do each day matter, just as much as the things you do. Every day you either protect your future or you quietly compromise it. The hopeful truth is that awareness breaks the cycle. Once you recognize the cost of neglect, small corrections become powerful. Paying attention again restores momentum. Rising standards again restores direction. Regret does not come from falling short. It comes from giving up without a fight. And the fight is not against life, but against daily neglect. Because what you consistently ignore today will eventually demand your full attention tomorrow personal growth is always the result of sustained effort, not intensity, because lasting change requires continuity rather than occasional force. Intensity feels powerful in the moment. It creates excitement, emotional energy, and the illusion of transformation. People attend a seminar, watch an inspiring video, or experience a burst of motivation and feel unstoppable. But intensity fades quickly. Life returns to routine, and without sustained effort, the initial surge disappears, leaving little real change behind. Growth does not respond well to extremes. It responds to rhythm. Just as the body grows stronger through regular training rather than one exhausting workout, the mind and character develop through steady practice rather than emotional spikes. Intense effort without consistency often leads to burnout or disappointment. Sustained effort, even when modest, builds resilience. It allows improvement to settle in rather than shock the system. The problem with relying on intensity is that it depends heavily on emotion. When you feel inspired, you act. When you don't, you stop. This creates an unstable pattern. Progress advances and retreats, without ever moving far forward. Sustained effort removes emotion from the equation. It is based on commitment rather than feeling. You act because it is time to act, not because you feel ready. Sustained effort also creates trust. When you do something regularly, you build confidence in your ability to continue. You stop questioning whether you will follow through and start expecting it. This expectation changes behavior. You plan differently. You take on bigger responsibilities. You invest in long-term goals because you trust yourself to stay with them. Intensity cannot build this kind of trust because it is unpredictable. Another limitation of intensity is that it often skips fundamentals. People push hard for quick results and overlook basics. Sustained effort respects the process. It focuses on repetition, refinement, and patience. Over time, fundamentals become strengths. Weaknesses are addressed gradually. Progress becomes solid rather than fragile. Sustained effort also allows for learning. Mistakes become feedback instead of failure. When effort is ongoing, there is room to adjust, improve, and grow wiser. Intensity often demands perfection immediately, leaving little space for learning. Growth requires time to reflect, correct, and evolve. Many people believe they need a powerful moment to change their life. In reality, they need a powerful routine. Routines create structure. Structure creates consistency. Consistency creates growth. The person who commits to sustained effort does not need constant motivation because progress itself becomes motivating. The most meaningful transformations happen quietly. They are not announced. They are not dramatic. They are the result of someone showing up again and again, long after the excitement faded. This is why personal growth looks ordinary in practice, but extraordinary in outcome. When you understand that sustained effort is the real driver of growth, you stop chasing emotional highs and start building daily discipline. You stop measuring progress by how you feel and start measuring it by how consistently you act. Over time, this steady approach reshapes your skills, your mindset, and your character, proving that real growth is not about how hard you push once, but about how faithfully you continue day after day.